Welcome to the debate. Imagine an industry that aggressively recruits something like 1,500 people, happily takes their licensing and training fees, but only actually has about 700 paychecks to hand out each month. That is the unspoken reality of the Jamaican real estate market right now.
Right, and it's a staggering disconnect. I mean, people see real estate as this ultimate, accessible path to wealth, but when you look closely at it, the math simply doesn't support the headcount.
Yeah, exactly. Today, we are exploring this very tension. We're grounding this in the analytical piece, The Hidden Costs of Easy Entry by Dean Jones and Jamaica Homes. And the central question we're looking at is this. Does the Jamaican real estate market represent a rigorous, rational meritocracy that naturally filters out the casual participants? Or is it, a structurally deceptive system built on an illusion of opportunity that inherently traps the majority of new entrants?
And it's a huge question.
It is. I argue that this market is actually a highly rational system. It's governed by global economic forces and the classic 80-20 rule, where dedicated full-time professionals are correctly rewarded for navigating a complex landscape.
Well, and I take a very different view. I argue that the so-called low barrier to entry in this market is actually a systemic trap. The industry suffers from extreme structural compression. There are all these unadvertised financial burdens that make the profession functionally unviable for the vast majority of people lured into it.
Okay, let's start by clarifying exactly what we mean when we talk about this market, because there's a massive illusion of scale here. Jamaica has over 1 million homes.
Right.
If you drive around the island, opportunity looks limitless. But let's strip away the noise. Only about 600 to 800 of those properties are actually sold by agents in any given month. Let's call it 700 deals.
Okay.
That is the actual playing field. Now, you have around 1,500 active agents operating in Jamaica. People say the system is flawed because so many fail, but honestly, it's because a huge chunk of those agents, maybe 60 or 70%, are treating a highly complex industry like a part-time side hustle.
I have to jump in here because...
Well, the market works beautifully for the full-time professionals who are answering client calls at 10 p.m. That top tier is pulling in well over 10 million Jamaican dollars a year because they are actually doing the work.
Look, I get that, but this is where the central illusion really takes hold. You're talking about 1 million homes versus 700 monthly deals. This right here is the difference between the stock of an opportunity and the flow of an opportunity.
Stock versus flow. That's a really great way to frame it.
Exactly. The stock, the 1 million homes sitting there, looks like vast wealth, but agents don't get paid on stock. They get paid on flow. The 700 homes actually moving.
Right, which is why the hustle matters.
But the flow is where the math gets brutal. You mentioned the 80-20 rule, right? The idea that the top 20% of agents capture the vast majority of the rewards? Let's apply that to our 700 monthly deals. If the top-tier agents lock down 60% of those transactions, that leaves exactly 280 deals left over. But you have over 1,100 lower-tier agents fighting for those leftovers.
Well, yes, competition is fierce.
It's beyond fierce. If you do the math, that equates to 1 deal every 4 to 8 months per person. Working harder doesn't change that bottleneck. It's a severely compressed system. It creates this crab-in-a-barrel survival environment where the industry demands you self-fund your training, your licensing, marketing, broker fees, essentially forcing you to pay simply to exist in a space where the math guarantees you will starve.
See, you're looking at the timeline to profitability as a systemic trap. I see it as a necessary professional filter. Yes, it takes anywhere from 1 to 3 years to build enough momentum to see consistent returns.
Right, but
consider how these deals actually get done. If you look at the official listing system, the MLS, you might see around 4,000 properties. But there's this massive shadow layer of real estate.
the off-market stuff.
Exactly. We're talking about pocket listings that aren't public, family-held land, complex title issues that take months to untangle. Navigating that shadow market requires deep, full-time commitment. Think of it like an elite athletic pipeline. Anyone can buy the running shoes, but only those who train full-time make the Olympic team. Isn't it unreasonable to expect a high-yield payout without a 100% time investment?
But blaming the agent's part-time status for their failure completely ignores the hard-coded reality of the system. Let's just, imagine every single one of those 1,500 active agents decides to quit their day jobs tomorrow.
Okay.
They go full-time. They dedicate 100% of their energy to the hustle. The mathematical limit of 700 monthly deals does not magically expand to accommodate their hard work.
Well, obviously the inventory is what it is, but
Right. So you still have half the workforce failing to make a living. It's an elaborate game of musical chairs where the industry happily sells a ticket to 1,500 people when there are only 700 chairs in the room. The failure isn't a reflection of their hustle. Failure is structurally required by the system itself.
I push back on that because it treats the number of chairs, the transaction volume, as a static, arbitrary limit, and it isn't. It's a dynamic reflection of global macroeconomics.
How so?
The market tightening we are seeing right now, which reduces that deal flow, is a rational correction. Think about the chain reaction here. Geopolitics affects energy. Energy drives inflation, and suddenly central banks push global interest rates up to 4 or 6%.
Right, mortgages get more expensive.
Exactly. When mortgages climb to 7 or 8%, buyers hesitate. Deal volumes drop. That is standard cyclical behavior. A 20 to 40% drop in volumes is something that top agents know how to navigate. If global capital shifts are reducing deal flow, isn't the market simply right-sizing itself by shaking out the casual participants who entered under the false premise of easy money?
Wow. Right-sizing is a very clinical way to describe financial devastation for everyday people.
It's economics.
But you laid out the global macroeconomic chain. Let's talk about how that actually hits a local Jamaican agent on the ground. Jamaica is heavily reliant on energy imports, right? And incredibly vulnerable to shipping costs. When global shipping lines are disrupted, the cost of bringing steel and cement to the island spikes massively, like 15 to 30% above pre-2020 levels. Local developers suddenly can't afford the materials. Construction halts.
Right. We've seen that.
Now imagine a mid-tier agent who is counting on the commission from a pre-construction condo to pay their rent. Because of a shipping crisis halfway across the world, that condo is delayed by 2 years. That agent doesn't get paid for 2 years. They bear the entire brunt of that global volatility, but they have absolutely zero control over it.
That is a very real human impact. I agree. But let me offer a different perspective on that exact vulnerability.
Okay.
That intense exposure to global forces is precisely why the market demands such high-level professionalism. The stakes aren't just local, they are international. The fact that the market doesn't shield a mid-tier agent from global inflation or supply chain crisis is proof of its rigorous nature.
By starving them out?
By rewarding resilience. It is a harsh market, absolutely, but it accurately reflects global economic realities. It correctly rewards those who build resilient networks. Agents who don't just rely on one pre-construction condo, but who diversify their pipelines to close deals even when shipping halts and mortgage rates spike.
But is it fair to call it a rigorous, rational market when the initial promise that draws people in is so deceptive? The fundamental issue is that the industry is perfectly happy to let people believe the old kitchen table adage, I can always try real estate.
Yeah, that phrase.
Right? It welcomes them in with open arms. It collects their licensing fees. It sells them the branding. It does all of this knowing full well that the structural reality, the uneven distribution of wealth, the volatile global supply chains, that mathematical bottleneck of musical chairs, will inevitably squeeze them out. The easy entry narrative actively masks a brutally compressed environment where the actual costs of doing business drastically outpace the mathematical availability of deals.
We definitely find common ground there. That sentence, I can always try real estate, is a deeply dangerous oversimplification.
Extremely dangerous.
Anyone entering this market must recognize that a low barrier to entry ultimately just means you are stepping into a very crowded space, not an easy one.
Precisely, and it means recognizing that what looks like a vast, unlimited field of opportunity is largely an illusion unless you understand exactly how the system's wired.
Yeah, it all comes back to that brilliant distinction you made earlier. The difference between the stock of an opportunity and the flow of an opportunity. Millions of houses sitting there mean very little if the actual flow of transactions is restricted by global interest rates, supply chain delays, and intense local competition.
And sadly, by the time most new agents realize the difference between stock and flow, they've already spent their savings printing the business cards.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It leaves us with a fascinating dynamic to ponder. We started by talking about a door that is propped wide open, inviting everyone inside.
Right.
But as we've seen, the room itself is subject to profound structural and global pressures that only a few are truly prepared to navigate. It begs the question, when an industry's barriers are virtually invisible on the way in, do they only become visible when they're locking you out?